Welcome to Readytex Art Gallery. I see a fabulous group of people. Eliza, whom you do not know probably. There are many artists in our midst. And Eliza doesn't know everybody, so I cannot introduce you possibly to everybody. That will happen afterwards. But in any case, welcome for your presence. My name is Monique Nushaya. I have the honor to lead this ecosystem called Readytex Art Gallery, and I'm very happy to welcome you here and honored that you're willing to spend your time with us. Eliza is a visiting artist from Baltimore. Yes. I would say the entire United States because she moves up and down, but she is here in a program spearheaded by Diaspora Vibe, Culture and Arts Incubator, which Diaspora Vibes does together with us and with visual artist Kud Nahar. Eliza will be closing off her residency very soon with pain in the heart, I already heard. And because of circumstances, we couldn't do this earlier, but she's happy to present her practice to you, and I will pass the mic to her.
Can everyone hear me okay? Well, I'm so happy to be here with all of you today. As Monique said, it's the end of my residency, and the other day I had to keep myself from crying because it's been such a special, special time here. I think not only in terms of getting to, not be working and be present in a new and beautiful place, but I think the artistic community and just Suriname in general is so special and has so many things that I find so precious that I don't find back home. To begin, okay, there we go. I think today, to first introduce myself, I want to say I'm a sister of two younger sisters. I am a granddaughter, which is one of my most favorite things to be. And I've grown up by the ocean and also by the river. And I am an artist, but I also do a lot of healing work with young artists at a college in Baltimore, Maryland. And that work is really important and precious to me because so much of it is about process and supporting young people who are trying to figure out who they are. And in being here, I've seen a lot of the answers or perhaps antidotes to the ways in which young people continue to get lost in arts colleges in the state. So that's my intro. So in my artistic practice, I'm usually beginning by taking in the place that I am in. So it requires a lot of presence, and I'm usually kind of untangling both inside of myself and outside of myself the patterns that I see. So which I wrote very beautifully, I was proud of how I wrote this on my slide, but I weave with a pen or pencil, making repeated line patterns that form large curved connecting forms. I do this to untangle the experiences wrapped in my own body and mirror the patterns of life that exist around and within me. So a lot of my work is about location and finding myself within it, as well as beginning to understand mic further. I'm getting a signal to move my mic a bit. But to understand what I'm connected to, what runs through me and where I'm at. And that's how I understand myself. It's kind of a cyclical inside out motion. So I wanted to summarize the process because I find it difficult to explain my work without just explaining how I come to it. And so I begin with what I call creative composting. In being here, I've got the chance to spend a lot of time with Kud Nahar, and I see a lot of similarities in the way in which you have described walking and being present to what comes to you and going to where you're called and then gathering things. Different from you, I gather more so in my mind's eye as well as in the rest of my body and being, patterns and rhythms that I see and experience in the world. So a lot of it is about presence. So I relate it to plants, so like compost, I take all of that in and I engage it in some way. I also wanted to mention here my spiritual practice, and really a practice of living is broadly under the terms of transformative energy work, which I'll explain more in a slide, but it's really an engagement of life. It's about being engaged, being present, being authentic, and the direction of downwardness. And then after I've done all of these things, I begin to draw in these like intuitive motions to get these different forms that excite me, that really feel like play. And sometimes as I'm doing them, I begin to unfurl the memories in the background that I didn't know I needed to process. And then after that, I get to play with color and trying to see all the different ways I can communicate those same things. So here's another kind of summary of the process. So the first place I began doing this was in Rock Creek Park in Maryland and Washington, D.C. in the States. And this is a place that's deeply sacred to me. I think for a lot of, I could say a million different things, but in the interest of time, it's a place where that gave me or made me feel safe enough to be present. And to be present with the land is really to be able to give and receive love. So I think there was where I first began to be able to be in relationship with humans. But before I got to humans, because humans can be complicated, I began with the land there. And it's still a place that I feel like is a reference point for how to be with anybody or anything. So once I do that, I move on, and these are some of the beginning drawings. With usually making a black and white. Later on, you'll see I've been experimenting more with color. These intuitive motions. So these were like journals, because I couldn't really write. And I had sisters, as I said before. So when I was young, my sisters would take my journals and read my secrets and know all my business. And so instead, I had these. I wasn't living with my sisters, but clearly I still have trust issues. And I moved on to these forms. After that, much later, I returned to these once I realized this was like my work. Like this was going to be my creative practice, because I didn't set out with this being something I needed to show in galleries. But I began to invert the images, experimenting with print, and yeah, just would play and listen to whatever it wanted to kind of transform to be. So like I said before, I begin most often with walking, gathering in my mind's eye all the patterns and rhythms around me, which I already mentioned. And so here are some images during a residency in Miami of sort of these patterns that you can see in my work, but you see kind of in the lines here and in these roots that come down from banyan trees in a park there. I think also, when looking at this slide, another thing that feels important to mention is, while I was here, on my second day, I was able to talk to Ronaldo Class, whose work is up on the walls, and I asked him about the title of the show, Whispers. And so he said, the work is really about how the land is always whispering to you. It's always trying to have that one-on-one relationship. It's always trying to do that. And then once many people are having conversation with the land, that is where you get community, which felt like such a beautiful definition of community. And to me, this work that I'm doing is about listening to the whispers of the land and cultivating that relationship. So, transformative energy work. It feels, I've mentioned my spiritual practice before, and it feels important to give a definition of it. This is the definition provided by my teacher, but I guess I'll read it. Sometimes I don't like reading straight from a slide. I'll let the music pass because I know I talk soft. Okay, so it's a synthesis of ancient and time-tested lineages. These include, Buddhist practices, those of Mongolia, and also my teacher, whose name is Kenneth Hover, has studied and is also part of indigenous lineages in Arizona and Mexico. And so This practice is kind of a summation of these that support the development of clairvoyance and the activation of one of its deepest purpose. Other important points that I think need to be included is that the goal is to move towards the land, to be authentic, and to honor resistance. So the heart emotion, it's about engaging heart emotions. And then within this, because he's often working with folks like me, who I'm in the States, no longer kind of in an intact community. I'm not deeply tied to, there's a lot of separation that's happened in my ancestral lineage, which is Irish Catholic, white folks in the States. I'm not deeply connected to the cultural practices of the people that I come from, which are Celtic and Druid, and find that the current practices that we use are deeply disconnecting, and they don't make me feel in my body and engaged in this life. And so this practice helps people come back to their own ancestral practices, which in my case have a lot to do with the honoring of land. I was talking for a while because the presentation quit. Here you go. One second. So here's the process. So I wanted to show you some of the drawings that I begin with. Usually I start with more of these darker lines on the outside and then add these smaller weavings inside. In many ways, my work mirrors welding and weaving techniques. Here's another one that has sort of the joints that I make that are meant to mirror welding. And then this is the final print once I add color. This one is called Where the River and the Ocean Meet. Like the Surinamese river, the river I grew up on is brackish water. And so it is literally the point where ocean and river meet. And I'm being directed, sorry. It is literally that place. And I think for me, it's such a site of creativity and coming together in such a particular way, which is why in being here it's felt, different and distinct, but also has this familiarity to me. Because the water that I grew up on is also brown in the same way, it's the same shade as the water here. So in many ways it's felt like meeting the cousin of the river that I've grown up on. So that's something I've really enjoyed. And then this piece is very different. It's called My Heart Folded Around the Grief, One Day I'll Let It Go. In much of the work that I do professionally, I do support people that are going through intense moments of shock and grief and loss. You can't go through life without experiencing those things. And the point, or the reason I have a commitment to the practices that I do is because it requires a type of strength to engage grief. And this is just a piece that reflects, my own experiences with loss, but the energy that comes with death also. Because when it's not traumatic death, death is an important, necessary part of life. So the land told me so. So this is a series that I had kind of mentioned before and talked a little bit about, but this is where I began the journals and the relationship I had with Rock Creek Park, which is also the unceded territory of the Anacostans. And like I said before, it's where I learned about love, to be honest. And so these are some of the pieces which I find so to me they're very cute and alive in a way. This is If I Lay Here, the earth could swallow me. If I lay here, I could be whole. I wanted to show you also the initial sketch. I must say to you also that I retitle my work very frequently because it's difficult to put into words all the ways that I see their aliveness, and in some ways I use them as writing prompts. So if you went on my website, you would also find, not recent, but writings that I've done along these. River, Grass, and Stone, Let Go. So I began most of my days, it's very much, not like a canyon, but a valley where the creek is. So I begin with these big tall trees at the start of my day and walk down to the creek and just sit And it's a place where I've let a lot go, and in letting a lot go, I've also been much more present to what is there. So this is called Moss, Soil, and Root, the ones who knew me. Yeah, this feels like a map to me. And in some ways, I think that place there knew me best for a time before I'm being quite vulnerable. But yes, it helped me know myself in a different way. So after I created that work, I was able to present it to Rosie Gordon-Wallace and the other artists at Diaspora Vibe Cultural Art Incubator, and that led to a residency where I spent a lot of time in the Little Haiti neighborhood and then a ton of time in Morningside Park, which has about 12 to 15 banyan trees, which are so special, like so amazing. And yeah, I just got to spend every day with them, which was so cool. So I'd spend my days drawing, and then I'd spend the afternoons with them. And this is the work that came from that. So I wanted to show you the actual roots, which you kind of saw before. This is called Water Up to My Waist. The park is also on a bay, on the Biscayne Bay. And that's this work, which I kind of think looks like a mermaid purse. This is more of the water and the plants. And this one I made then. For whatever reason, it makes me think of dragons, which is why it's funny we're standing in front of this piece. But it's called Dragon Egg. The color blue tells me where to go. And it also feels like a very directional piece in terms of wayfinding. So like I said before, my energy work process is a lot about opening and becoming grounded and stable in the land and in my life. But the emphasis is also on establishing connection ancestrally. It gives it much more weight. And for myself, it's helped me know myself a lot better. And so I only have one piece that I put in here. I guess I just didn't have other images, but also in being here, I want to spend much more time on this series and work. And so this is the one that I'll show you, but it's called On My Grandmother's Hands to Be Held. Grandmothers are super important to me. I love my grandmother deeply. I have 1,000 funny stories I could tell you about her. But she was also raised by her grandmother. So my grandmother's mother had passed when she was very young, and her grandmother was just a really significant woman in her life. Additionally, she would have a practice on a certain day in August of going down to the ocean and collecting water that she would use to spiritually clean the house for the rest of the year. And so that was something that I liked a lot, to be honest, once I discovered that little fact, and I find it reflected in this work. So as I'm an artist and have to give presentations about my work, I wanted to contextualize it inside of what other people were doing. And so the first piece I'm going to show is actually of an artist here, Cherie, who just arrived. But as I was about to leave, I was thinking about putting this presentation together, and I moved out of my apartment. I already told you this. And I found this work in 2019 before I began this drawing process. And these forms are particular to here, but mirror a lot of the Celtic and Druid designs that my ancestors made. So at the time I had limited understanding, but now I understand and speaking to you what these patterns are of and who they belong to and the cultural significance. Not just the aesthetic, like they're quite pretty, but they're so much more than that in terms of being from the people that are out here. So these are the patterns I began to reference and trying to figure out, what am I up to and who am I of? And then in being here, I was able to see such a reflection of those same things. And these are the designs of a door of Rosie Gordon-Wallace that I believe is woodworkers that are of the Maroon people. And that is the same for these two pieces. One is at the Tordica, how do I say the name? Tordica? The hotel. And then this is here in Readytex. And so where my work is heading. So before I came here, I had begun some of these sketches. which I'm interested to see what they'll be. I was playing more with color and texture, so these are on laminated pieces that I had used to make screen prints, but I was interested in how they were beginning to fold in the light, because oftentimes when people see my work, they recommend sculpture. And I'm also interested in layering, so I made a print of that same form that's outlined, and then I was layering the different pieces over top. And so during the Suriname residency, so this first piece, I had began just 2 days ago, but as it might have been mentioned, I'm staying with Kurt Nahar, who uses a ton of collage elements or found objects in his work. And so I had found this shilling oil, and also had experimented with using hem blue in the actual work itself with glue and paint to kind of see what that does, as well as imbue the work with the meaning and significance of those things. This, I made these two pieces I made at different times. The middle one I had made when I was in Camoena. And I wish I actually had included another photo, because I was just looking on a map, and the way that these folds look remind me of how the rivers map on the Google Maps, I guess is what it is. And then this one was made both in spending time with the water, but also in observing all the different types of architecture and forms, both in the houses, but also I was really interested in how all the grates are very different here. It's just exciting. I love seeing all the different patterns. And then I also would really like to experiment with wood, and I would have the opportunity to go to Sena Budaya at the Volks Academy and do batik, and was really excited about that process. I also had the opportunity to do ceramics and want to play. And then also in visiting Cherie's studio, seeing the way in which she is playing and how you are playing with all of these different materials just sounded so fun, as well as understanding what these different patterns mean. So I like to make a list of things I want to do after. So while I was here, I met an artist that goes by the name Sapiens. They do music and writing. They're a really wonderful person. And when I showed them my work, he was really interested in making sound, and how, because he's a musician, incorporating sound in these pieces in some way. As I named before, I'm really interested in playing with textile, wood, and clay as inspired by Cherie, and then I really want to incorporate different collage elements as inspired by Kurt. In being here also, I think it really made me understand how significant it is to be in an intact community and also be in a cultural context where time-tested practices are practicing, and you have context for art, you have context for beautiful objects, because they have a significance in a way. They do something. They're not just something you need to sell, or, though it's nice to make money from art, but it's not the same thing. And so for me, a priority of mine is to also have the opportunity to connect with elders who are still connected to practices of the Celtic and Druid people, both so I can understand the spiritual practices for myself and make them mine, but also, make them work for my life today, and also understand like basket weaving, different types of dye, all the different practices that I only know kind of online and through personal research, which just couldn't possibly be the same. I also work with young students. I work specifically with students with disabilities that are artists, and I help them figure out processes that work for them so they can become unstuck and actually access school. That being said, I see so many students that their only goal, or like the goal that they're given by school, is to make work for a contemporary art market, and I think it's easy to get so lost if you don't have the same cultural and spiritual practices that I see so many artists be committed to here and incorporate in their work. And in my work, I see that the risk of losing that is really quite dire. Unfortunately, we hospitalize in both mostly in mental health institutions, and sometimes in physical health spaces connected to addiction, depression, and loss. And I think if people had more of a connection or more of a sense of purpose in this deeper way, it would be possible to kind of avoid some of those losses. Yes, I have to go back to that job, so I'm just thinking about that now. But yeah, I think that would be it'd be amazing to bring some of these young artists here to Suriname. I have a lot of specific ideas around that. And then I really would like to do some writing. I wrote 2 written reflections because sometimes I'll put 5 and I can't possibly reach that goal. But I would really like to do some writing to kind of, continue to process and integrate this experience. And that's it. So stay in touch. If you want to come find me, come find me. If you're ever in the States, don't hesitate to reach out. And yeah, that's it. I also have some work that I wanted to hand out if people wanted to look at it. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for being with me here today. It's so special to get to have this opportunity with you. And that's it. Hi. Thank you. Yes. Oh, let me turn my mic back on. I forgot about questions. Okay.
All the initial sketches
Yeah.
they're all by hand.
Yes.
That's amazing because all the regularity and wow.
Yeah, it hurts your finger eventually. But in that vein of like presence and being there, if you're steady inside, you can be steady in your life. So